When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some of we shouldn't.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Take it away, boys.
Take you away, Ryan, to a distant land.
Hi, Tim.
Where we can duplicate your body.
Right. To where? What is this country called?
I don't think they ever even say.
We're talking about Infinity Pool today, folks.
It's a magical place.
It's called Latoka. Yes, hello, folks. Thank you for being here. Welcome, as she said, to Dismembering Horror. We're very happy to have you here. Latoka. Yeah, that's what I thought. Made up place, I'm guessing. Very happy to have you here at Dismembering Horror. As she said, specifically, though, episode 198 of Dismembering Horror, where we are talking about the new Brandon Cronenberg joint, Infinity Pool, new release movie, which is always fun, and a new Cronenberg joint. I'll take it whether it's him or his old man. All right, Tim. Well, anything you've got before we jump into Infinity Pool here?
Let's just in review what Brandon Cronenberg movies have we done? We only done one, right?
Which I believe was his only film thus far, Possessor, unless I'm missing something.
He did Antiviral.
Oh, okay, right.
Which I haven't seen actually. So
I haven't seen that either.
It's one of those ones where I keep going, oh, I should watch that, and then I don't.
Yeah, I'd want to see his whole oeuvre at this point.
Yeah, but we liked Possessor.
Yeah, we did like Possessor, and I'm excited to see what you like about Infinity Pool.
Yeah.
Few quick things follow up. Today we're recording this. Just got to mention Puxtani Phil did see his shadow today, so we have 6 more weeks of winter.
How thrilling.
It's Groundhog Day, yep. But more apropos for our show, just fun follow-up things to some recent episodes we did. We recently did the World Fair movie. Forget
We're all going to the World Fair.
We're all going to the World Fair, and then we also recently did Skinamarink. Both are very about like today's digital communications, modes and stuff.
Yeah.
I just thought it was really fun. I saw on Twitter the filmmaker behind We're All Going to the World's Fair talk about their views of Skinamarink.
Oh, really?
And it's just fun to know what they thought about it.
That's
here.
cool.
So I wanted to read their kind of their opinion of it. Skinamarink. It's just fun and unique, the day and age we live in. And I think they're both films that any scrutiny and opinions on are kind of fun since they're obtuse films. But here we go. Jane said on their Twitter, 3rd viewing of Skinamarink this morning, and it just keeps growing for me as a deeply painful reflection on queer childhood. I've read some literalized attempts to explain the film's plot, i.e. they're in hell, Kevin is concussed and fever dreaming, etc. And to me, the film's relationship to narrative is too purposefully oblique to support any single literal interpretation, which is part of why it's so refreshing in the current horror landscape, and part of why some viewers are pissed at it. What does seem clear, though, is the film's commitment to atmosphere and its hazy childhood dream logic. This is a memory film drawing influence from the liminal internet's, quote, cursed image aesthetic. We are being told to watch Skinamarink like a hazy memory. My own earliest memory is of needing to pee but being too afraid to leave my bed and walk to the bathroom. The dark hallway loomed, as did fear of my father's anger if I was caught out of bed at night. Skinamarink conjures the memory of this terror for me exactly, how it felt reflected through the grain of time. So perhaps instead of interpreting the film's horror literally, consider it as a reflection on queer childhood in a bad home. Consider each character, faces purposely distorted as loose subconscious apparitions. Kevin and Kaylee, both K names like the filmmaker, switching or respective interchangeably as the camera moves between first and third POVs. The arc of the film, a descent into defamiliarization / loss of identity, ceiling becoming floor, faces deformed and missing from family photos, TV distortion, increasing throughout as if the filmmaker is warping the very memory of childhood to conjure a specter that is very familiar to me. I suspect other queer kids who grew up in a certain time and certain type of home. It's even there in the name Skinamarink, a wholesome kid's song that lingers in the memory years later like a bad dream. This is the film to me, a hauntological conjuring of the trauma of queer childhood dehumanization. What is your name? The specter asks at the end of the film. Is he speaking to Kevin, Kaylee, or to Kyle, to me, or to you?
Cool.
Fun we can get the thoughts of we're all going to the World's Fair filmmakers on Skinamarink.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun, like saying they're saying straight up, there's no fixed read, but here's my read, which is just fun. Right. Yeah. Okay, great. All right, now for today, everyone. No, not Skinamarink. Infinity Pool, episode 198. I already said it. All right, so did it premiere this? Yeah, from 2023. Let's jump into it with our trailer, written and directed, as I said, by Brandon Cronenberg. Infinity Pool.
I don't understand why we're doing this. We barely know these people.
It's one day. Let's mix things up a bit.
Hi! You're just happy you found your fan club.
I've been waiting 6 years for your second book. Is it coming out soon?
I'm working on it.
What do you do for money then?
You married rich.
I actually came here looking for inspiration.
Mr. James Foster, you'll have to come with us.
Here, the punishment for any crime committed is death.
What did you say?
But for a significant sum, we'll build a double to stand in for your execution.
Double.
For our rating system, would we tell ourselves, if we had not seen this film, to avoid, stream, rent, or buy Infinity Pool?
Well, I would like to watch this movie again and maybe again. So I'm a buy.
Great.
It's got quite a lot of the things that I like, but then there's some very interesting like dichotomy style filmmaking that I really like, and it's tipping into the Cronenberginess that I've traditionally liked, but still like retaining, I think, Brandon's own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
the Cronenberg 2.0 of it all.
Yeah, I mean, like I aspire to make things that I would classify as Cronenberg-esque.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, when you do that or when you like aim for that, you don't want to be derivative and you don't want to just be like copying Cronenberg. But there's a feeling, I think, and there's sort of some tenets that are consistent through Cronenberg films, and then films that I would classify as Cronenberg-esque.
You mean in both of their films when you say Cronenberg? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And so those are all things that I really enjoy. And I think this one, on top of that, has a level of performance that is really, really up there for me. I would happily own this.
Yeah, Tim. I was coming into this with what felt like a conservative rent it because I'm still wrapping my head around it.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you put it as I would watch it again and then I would also watch it again, you got me thinking, yeah, I totally would. So I guess that makes me a buy it too. Why not get on board with it? I really thought, and maybe, not to get too ahead of ourselves for our what worked section, but this felt like a definite upgrade from Possessor in a way for me.
Possessor is
not that was bad though.
I don't think it was bad, but Possessor felt way more, what's a good word for it? Sort of untethered and not tangential, untethered and like ethereal almost, where it's like we're winding around sort of like, I don't know, floating around in outer space or something to me. I don't know why I feel that way exactly, but this feels so much more concise of an idea. Maybe that's what it really is. And so like within that, there are so many opportunities to feel like maybe you're getting ahead of the film of like, oh my God, is this going to happen? But it pays off, I think, almost better than those moments of anticipation. And so to me, that's a filmmaker really being like, oh, I know where I'm going and I know what you probably are thinking I'm doing. So I'm going to mess with you.
Great.
That's really good.
Well, I'm excited to pick all that apart. But before we do that for what's worked, we like to summarize to all get on the same page here. We hope you've seen the movie. That is the spirit in which we will be discussing it. But all the same, whether you've seen it or not, what was this movie, Tim?
Okay. I think this movie starts in a kind of ostensible way as like almost like a Daniel Steele novel. Do you remember Daniel Steele like commercials where it's like, they're like romance novels, of maybe the 80s or 90s. And it kind of starts with this what I would consider a trope of the romantic, like troubled romantic couple, right? They're on vacation. They're trying to not necessarily rekindle, but they're trying to like salvage something. In this case, it's James's writing career. But you can tell right away that the relationship is like murky. It's not doing great. They're at a resort and it's not like they're like, wow, what a beautiful romantic time. And like, it just furthers our relationship. It's not happening that way. And so like any good, kind of, I don't know what you call this genre exactly, but it's like cheater's drama. Is there going to be infidelity?
It's White Lotus, season 18. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, right. It's like, what's going to happen between this couple? Is it going to go well or is it going to go badly? And so that all lives inside this capsule of like romance or infidelity, sort of like coupledom, because they meet another couple at the resort, and then that couple seems enticing and interesting, but a little weird. And you're like, wow, where are they going to take our couple that we've been introduced to?
Well, she takes our couple pretty quickly.
Right. So then almost right away, upon, I guess it would be the second interaction. We are taken outside the grounds of this resort. And it's important to know that the country that they're in does not like tourists, but lives off of tourists. And so the resort has a very strict rule that you don't go outside of the grounds. Like, it's barbed wire and fences. Like, you're not, as a guest, allowed outside because chances are the locals will rob you, rape you, kill you, whatever. So there's this looming threat of that. But they, of course, like idiots, go anyway. And upon doing so, we get more of it's sort of, so what is,
we got James Foster, Mia Goth as Gabby Bauer.
Gabby, yeah. So Gabby is like femme fatale, like all the way. You know right away that she's seemingly into James. She's gonna be the wedge.
She's the one in charge in a way.
Right. And James is intrigued because she's presented herself as a fan of his one shitty book.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, a fan. Like his whole life is spiraling around whether or not he even has a career as a writer. So once that setup happens, we think, okay, I thought to myself, like, oh, we're going to go into this very weird land of like seduction, infidelity, like spiraling, whatever.
Which we do.
We do, but in the Cronenbergiest of ways. So James semi-drunkenly runs over a local and kills him. And everybody kind of freaks out, rightly so. They get back to the compound resort, and the next morning James is picked up by the police, which is like the worst thing that you can imagine happening, because the police are always corrupt, and like this is not a country that views outsiders positively.
It's not the worst thing if you're rich.
So it turns out, exactly. That's the whole movie. Mm-hmm. The cops present to James an option. They have a law that says if you kill a local, the punishment is death. But if you have a lot of money, you can pay to be duplicated so that the eldest son of the deceased can kill the duplicate and feel vindicated in that. But you have to watch it.
And then, exactly. And then the rest of the movie, like, well, all good movies, they take that setup and premise and do, as we like to say, pursue potent possibilities. What could only happen in this film with this setup, with this story, with these characters in this setting? And we get just that, and it's all great.
And it all, and so the rest of the movie is kind of this spiraling in that realm where you learn that Mia Goth and her husband and their like rich friends think this is all just like a fun game where because they have enough money that they can just go commit crimes.
Feel zero threat. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can just pay to be duplicated so that there's no consequence. Like, it's like, I have money, I could just do whatever I want. And they find revelry in that process, that they like enjoy watching their doubles get killed, which is super dark. And then there's this sexual sort of, because all bets are off, like they can just have vices and spiral into whatever realm they want because there's no real consequence in their mind.
Yeah.
The crux of it is that James is taken along for this ride with them as if he's being folded into their group in a like positive way.
He's the new recruit, basically,
right.
And he's going through his hazing, essentially.
Right. But it turns out that's really not what they want with him. They are there to just fuck with him.
And you could say his girl or his wife is kind of part of that crux as far as always representing the non-corrupted crazy world.
Right. Or as Gabby says, like, women like her keep men like you weak. Something to that effect. That's a paraphrase.
Gets to his head, yeah.
And so that is the emphasis of the whole movie, from Gabby's point of view, is this idea of like be a man. It's super misogynistic, right? It's this very toxic masculinity like concept that Gabby is presenting to him to emasculate him, to make him like fall under her spell more, which is great. And he does.
It's great in the irony of it.
Right. And then they all kind of go home, right? Like they eventually it's time to go home and go back to their lives. And he's gone through this terror multiple times. And I think the question is ultimately, is he changed or not, right? Like I think he is, but there's also the question of like, the double of the double of the double, at any point could he possibly be not the original?
Right, which is another kind of ongoing philosophical thematic
right. So there's
crux through it.
Huge theme of like self.
This is all really what worked. So you ready to get into it?
That's true, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's do it. There's the summary. Here we go. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Yeah, since we've been touching on it already, just these two huge overarching things that I love, and make me go, yeah, of course, I want to own this. The Hostel story, basically. Rich people going to exploit local community can just get away with literal murder because they're rich. And what's
not even that they themselves are rich. In this case, that is sort of the whatever the word precept, but that the country is reliant on this industry, period.
Yeah.
Right? The country is so poor that the only thing that they have, they are bound by tourism. They can't exist without an influx. So you don't even necessarily have to be rich per se. You just have to be from somewhere else. Right. Because by default, everywhere else has more money than this country.
True. But as far as what I was getting to, what I love so much, it's that the idea of, yeah, if you are super rich like these people presented, or the people in the Hostel movies pay to kill people for the thrill of it, it's that question of like going down the path of like, what is a bigger and bigger sort of thrill, as if that is the purpose in life. And then when it crosses the line into hurting other people, like that becomes an essential part of how one feels alive, I guess.
Right, because of the consequence, like, node.
Yes. Well, it's just the extremity of it all.
Yeah.
It's what you do after skydiving. It's this idea that there's some natural escalation being human if you're just left to be able to do anything, and when that takes a turn into evil because it's relying on harming others. I love those themes and ideas. And then that combines with another horror idea that I just love, so near and dear to me. You know, I mentioned the 78 Invasion of the Body Snatchers being one of my favorites, but this idea of we somehow aren't, you know, unique, that we aren't special because you can just make a double of us. And this is like an extension of those ideas in a way I'd never seen before. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, they're clear pod people. Here, they have your exact memories, emotions, whatever. So it just adds. So by combining that with the other kind of story, you know, I set up, it just brings it to this whole new level of like, what's the next thrill after Hostel? Of it's interesting because it's like a thrill based on sort of the spiritual idea of connection and disconnection with, you know, each other, one world, all that jazz. So it's like, yeah, what's the next step up from just killing a stranger and that adrenaline ride? It's like the disconnection from who should, even if you're the most selfish person, to be maybe the one person you do relate to, and that's yourself.
You would think.
Yeah. So it just adds this whole other layer of like, these people are so far gone and it's just so terrifying. I mean, God, those scenes, Tim, where it was, oh God, and it was just such a fun twist when you're watching it, when they're getting taken, we watch them getting taken away as if they're all going to get executed. We see them get executed. And then no, they're just the actual them, as far as we know, are sitting over in the stands cheering on their own deaths. I mean, God, it's so good.
It's really well done, and there's just enough clues that we like because of the point of view that we're given. We're set up with the original time that James goes through this, right? And there's like these little clues. So he's put in a white gown before he gets duplicated, right? And then after the duplication, when he and his wife are watching the execution, the white gown that the copy is put in has a little design around the collar. It's like a flower design. It's the only thing that's really different about the gowns. If you can miss that pretty easily. So when we come back and it's directed so that we assume that we're watching original copy or original James, not a copy, and all of them because they've been arrested again. And the only clue that is a copy is this little detail on all of their gowns, right? And so you can't. That's not even. It's a suggestion that they're a copy because we can't know exactly that signifies definitively that they're a copy. But once we get into the execution scene, I think for me at least, I was like, oh, okay. They're probably a copy for that singular reason we're being given this clue, and then it turns out to be true. But I love the subtlety of that kind of thing, right? That there's like a little flourish, a little decoration, just enough for us to be like, is this the copy or is this the original them?
I guess that worked on me in a subliminal sense because I don't really notice those details, but I was caught up as if it was them. It was like, where is this going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I continuously was like, I'm being messed with, so I'm expecting it to go in a weird direction or to be subverted. The
movie was already, you felt in good hands enough that you couldn't really tell if it was going to do A, B, or C, or Z.
Right.
Yeah.
And at times it actually does the thing that I was anticipating, but twists it just enough to make it even more interesting, which I absolutely love. But so what was my original point of that? So thematically, this idea of copying yourself. There's a bunch of visual, what would you call it? Sort of metaphors, I guess, or just whatever. Like there's scenes. So one of the first scenes that sort of speaks to this. This is hard to describe. What I want to get at is that Cronenberg is doing almost throughout the movie. He's taking the two themes that we've talked about, right? The theme of
getting your thrills.
Yeah.
Exploitation.
The seductive, well, like the primitive side of us. That if we had no rules, if we were just an ego monster.
Yeah. Which it's fun to put in the context. I always think of like the Beatles talking about becoming the most famous band in the world. And they kind of went on the trip. It's like, we literally have it all. And that's when they started being like, okay, looking for something else, kind of being like, this ain't all it.
So
it's like, what happens if you keep going down that level with access to everything?
But we get these really cool setups. So there's that theme, and then there's the duplication theme, right? And both are constantly kind of being intertwined early on. So for example, when they go on their first picnic, they go outside the grounds, they're on the picnic, they're getting drunk. Gabby's husband keeps like trying to force food on them and saying like things like, I'm plumping you up. Like there's this very fable, like fairy tale sort of undertone to all of this, which is, their morality plays in and of themselves, right? The whole point of a fable is to like teach a lesson. And so for example, it's like, this is hearkening back to Hansel and Gretel, right? Let me fatten you up for a bigger purpose, a malevolent purpose that's going to come down the line. There are these little clues like that. And then there's, in that same scene when James goes off to have a pee, he's emptying, in quotations, he's emptying himself out, right? His self, you can make this correlation that by peeing, he's emptying some part of himself out of himself.
Okay.
Right? And then they double up on it and have Gabby show up and give him a hand job until he empties this other part of himself out. And the symbolism of that, of ejaculating, is even deeper in that that's a representation of how we as humans duplicate ourselves, right? At least half of ourselves in our genome.
I agree. There's definitely some sort of intentional look at this because of the way it's shot. Here's the urine splashing down, exact same shot. Right. Here's his seed.
Right. And then later, when he sees his first duplicate, I think it's this one. I'm pretty sure it's this one. When he sees his first duplicate being, stabbed in the stomach by the kid, there's another shot in that same vein of the blood emptying out of him and splashing on the ground. And then we see the hand of the kid who's been stabbing him, and it's covered in blood, and that's dripping. And then later, with another duplicate of himself that he beats up, right? This happens twice. He beats one up that he doesn't know is him, and then he beats the final one up into oblivion, like he smashes his face in with his fist. And we see again the same imagery of the bloody hand and the blood dripping onto the ground. So the internal emptying out happens earlier, and then this external emptying out where he's literally killed his, I don't know, you can make this whatever correlation, that the last version of him that he kills is himself, his old self, because that's the dog version of him that has the collar that she brings out. that version is the submissive, emasculated him that existed before all of this happened. So there's these like stacking sort of themes going on of kind of the same basic few ideas, but they're presented in such a progressively intense and cool way, but they all are connected to each other. And I think that having that makes me feel like there's like, it's just the greatest type of filmmaking, because you're not just following this story. Like, it's just not surface level. It's like many, many layers deep.
Well, down to just subtle things in some shots in themselves, some visual motifs. And I'll say the examples, but just to kind of set it up too, all that we're talking about, I think there's, like all great horror, we always circle back to, it's can feel contradictory, where in this case, that sense that you are part of everything and not unique on some level, but we're all just part of some big cosmic soup together, that can feel extremely warm and comforting and freeing, and at the same time, the most horrifying thing ever, the most disconnecting thing ever. So down to, it had this like unique shot, just for some reason, I mean, it seems so simple, but somehow felt like I hadn't seen one exactly like before, of just the ocean filling the frame and the waves going together. It just, kind of like when you're looking at the water from a certain angle, and it just has this really like just kind of hypnotizing effect to it. Yeah. That definitely gave me that feel of, some kind of visual motif metaphor of we're all just, as I said, this soup together, this cosmic soup. But then down to the end credits, I thought were so brilliant, where you just had the name, the actor's name, whoever's credit, repeated ad nauseum, going like from the top frame to bottom of the frame. I mean, that's it right there. So good.
I like, actually, it's interesting that you point out that the images of the ocean, because there are 3 distinct versions of the shot of the ocean. One, I don't know why I thought I was paying attention to this specifically, but the first one has more sky. The horizon line is lower in the frame. And so it's like it's like a third ocean and 2/3 sky. The second one reverses that, where it's 2/3 ocean and 1/3 sky. And the last one, this sort of where the waves are actually like whatever, not crashing, but like we're seeing the foam of all the waves, is full frame, like it's filling the entire frame. And we could pick that apart, I guess, but ultimately it just feels like on its most simple level, the ocean itself is a volatile thing. And as the movie carries on, we're being more and more like consumed by the chaotic nature of the ocean or just chaos, right? The nature of chaos is growing and growing and growing. So even on just a really surface level, it's like we're just being presented with imagery that like supports what's going on in the film.
Right. You see The Fabelmans, by the way?
Not yet.
All right. People who did will know why I brought that up.
Okay.
Yes.
This is also, by the way, a old like imagery theme in film. Like the bubbling liquid is a trope that's been around almost for all of film, right? Like I can't think of early examples, but like people staring into the foam or the bubbles of a drink has been used over and over, and is sort of like we're paraphrasing older film over time. Like Travis Bickle does it in Taxi Driver. Like I've seen many versions of this, and this is like the biggest version.
It's the idea of alchemy, and that our physical world is malleable and not as solid as we think, which makes me want to mention too, it's so perfect they introduced the psychedelics drug aspect to it, and that we have all those trippy scenes of just, I mean, the nipple either itself like kind of turning into something a little Play-Doh-y, or like something exuding from it that's a substance that's unnatural. I mean, all that stuff was great.
On that point though, there's also, alchemy is a good word, because like so much of this movie is about ourselves and how we change through experience. And the most extreme version is that we ourselves are not ourselves anymore, that there's another version of ourselves. That's not even a change. That's alchemy in its truest form, right? Like turning one thing into a completely new thing. And the idea that there's two things wrapped up in that. One is the idea of self disappearing, right? Like that you're you, but you're a new version of you. Is like that's a really cool just way to present the arc of any character changing and like like it's a literal version of them, being a new version of them is actualizing. But with the other thing that's constantly sort of being reinforced is what's a good word for it? The delineation between masculine and feminine. So like Gabby's character,
or dominating and submissive.
Yes, which is a theme that was in Possessor too, I think. So Gabby presents initially as very feminine, right? Like, and it's all an act that we learn. So like, it's already false.
Or they're just all sorts of sides to her.
True, but that it's specifically that it's a presentation at first.
They're being seduced in a way,
and we learn later that she isn't like that, that she's much more than that she exudes at the end some very traditionally masculine behavior and like presentation too. And she's like, she's in charge. She's the person with the gun. She's the person telling him what to do. Like she's emasculating him anyway, right? Like all those things.
I mean, that first act of whacking him off is it's just everything. It's such, it's representative of all that.
Right. And so what I'm getting at is like specifically with the nipple, the nipple growing to a sort of like a shaft is sort of this very cool. Maybe I'm reading a lot into this, but my takeaway is that you have the feminine nipple growing into a phallic thing that is both masculine and feminine, right? Like they have similar things going on with them, and they are the same thing in that moment, but those are two sort of visual sides of the same coin.
Right. That's the kind of thing where I agree that meaning is there, but that it may not be intentional. Like that's where it came from, you know, but it's a read on it.
I mean, that's the type of thing that I want to be like to Cronenberg, like the nipple's also a penis, right? Right?
He'll say, sure, Tim.
Right.
Yes.
But all those things, I think, like, even if it isn't intentional, they all are there all the time. The binary masculine, feminine sort of back and forth is constantly there.
And those masks they put on are kind of androgynous.
Right, exactly. And also I was like, oh my God, are those actual faces of duplicates that got killed?
Yeah.
Right. So there's just like, there's a layering and a cohesion within the design of all these things to the story, which I think is just amazing.
I thought it was interesting earlier. You said what you say about seeking experience and like that makes us grow, right? But what it is about experience making us grow or change, you said, making us change. So what it is about that, it's experience it means going outside of your comfort zone. So that's why it's so cool. We almost do get caught up in a way with like that hazing aspect when they're first kind of goading him to do something illegal, to like break into this house and rob these people, whatever. It's like, it's great seeing him be forced to make that decision because we can almost relate to that instinct of like, I'm with these people, they're having fun and seem like in a way that I want to be too.
And well, they're making him feel like he belongs, right? Which something he clearly has not been feeling.
Right. I wanted to get to, so like we brought up earlier, that it's Cronenbergian, whether that's father or son is out the window at this point. Maybe we can try to separate them, but I like to check in for our context here, what that kind of means and is.
Yeah.
For me, it's like the matter-of-fact way a specific world is presented that's sort of just askew of our world. So you think like in David Cronenberg's films, like the way this sort of organization or scientific or psychological sort of method might be sort of first presented often in like some kind of lecture scene or something like that. And then for this, it's the sort of that it feels like it's a fake country with a fake like language, like how it's written looks more like something out of I assume it's not real. Looks like it's Star Wars language. And then the technology itself, another very Cronenberg thing, where the lines are blurred between the sort of organic side of it and the more technical nuts, bolts, wires side of it.
Yeah. I would add the thing that I personally get from Cronenberg the most consistently is through character. And specifically that the inner self, I feel like almost every single one of his films, except from the ones maybe I haven't seen, but like there's only 4 that I haven't seen of his.
I hope I can get you to like The Brood. I want you to see that again.
I mean, I like it. It's just, it's of its time, I guess. I don't know. It's cool. But it has this too. So they all, to me, have this very specific thing. The inner self of character and the outer self of character meet through the body. So you are almost in every single film, you are seeing a transition of self through the physical body.
By also going outside of their comfort zone in the internal sense, that's because of what they're doing in the external sense. That's unique to the rules of this situation.
Yeah, and exactly. The world's modality dictates,
or the mechanics of the thing itself. In this case, the cloning machine. Right.
So, take The Fly for example. Right. You have his inner self and his eventual outer self. Like, he has to transition through his desire for success with this particular thing through his own science and technology, which is a very common theme in Cronenberg stuff, and be changed into this thing, this new thing, through the change in his physical self, body. Like, so like, I guess that's what I'm getting at, right? Like, everybody goes through like a metamorphosis of body in like all of these films. So that's in David's films. Brandon, I feel like, is doing something different where he is speaking more about inner self in terms of the mind, and like is tapping into body things, but it's more, I don't know, I would say it's almost more the body. Well, I guess in this one it seems disconnected, right? Like in Possessor, it's disconnected from herself. In this one, the duplicates are disconnected from them as people. So the change is not happening to their physical body in this.
Yeah, it feels like Brandon has added an extra dimension on it all.
It's almost like a philosophy.
Right. Well, I kind of like we were talking about, in these, I kept using the term cosmic soup way. David Cronenberg's films are, very much on that immediate body thing. And then it's how it's affecting their sort of character and their trajectory and whatever. Brandon Cronenberg, it's like he's, I don't want to say taking it up a level, but adding this other dimension to it by acknowledging our inner world is part of that cosmic soup too. The kind of like all reality is the same on some baseline level. What's mental,
I guess I would say that it's more directly psychologically based in Brandon's stuff. Although it's bordering on stepping out of the psychology and into the literal, like nature of duality, of self. Anyway, so I think those are all really cool things that continue to be kind of pushed. It's almost like, it's like an evolution. I wonder actually if how influenced Brandon's goals are in these stories to point at how he's evolving from his dad's like films.
I'd say he's getting good enough that he's probably not conscious of that. I don't think you can be too conscious of those things.
Maybe, like,
but I think I think it's absolutely fascinating that there is such a direct line between him and his dad, and it's just kind of this really interesting, unique example of like a parent kid connection and what is passed on in a very, appropriately Cronenberg way.
Well, it's like, how can you not be influenced by your parentage, right? Like, you're influenced one way or the other, positive or negative, right? Like, your parentage has an effect on you.
Right. But you could, you could argue with those same reasons he would be completely different in what he's interested in.
But that again also would be an effect, right? Like, so you're bound to be being affected by, especially when you go into the same field.
Right. More things of note, I feel like.
I guess so, topic. Yeah, that's true.
I want to say, like, last kind of funny thing, and maybe just to get out of the way, I think acting was great. But as far as the Cronenberg connection, so Alexander Skarsgård, he felt so much to me like Viggo Mortensen, and not a bad way at all. Yeah. But he felt like right now in Viggo is Daddy David's, Daddy Cronenberg's. Just feel fun to kind of call him that in the sense of like, remember in what did we watch that he acted in?
What, Nightbreed?
Yeah, Nightbreed. It's Leather Daddy in that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just felt almost, you could see the equivalent, where something about them felt similar, and they also both felt perfect for their kind of world in a way, their world building, their story, the character. Yeah, it was great. He was perfect in it. Mia
Having
Goth
said
goes without
that,
saying.
I think that an interesting thing is happening that I agree with you. And actually, I would say that by casting Alexander Skarsgård, you are casting a traditionally, he's a big dude. He's a big, sort of traditionally, quote unquote, masculine dude, as is Viggo. You know, they are archetypal in this sort of like, I'm a dude, I'm a man, I'm like a big, strong dude.
And kind of average in a way too.
Yeah, they're not, exactly. Like
they're regular, kind of in a way.
Like Skarsgård, I feel like, had he not become an actor, would be a very tall, lanky, skinny, average guy. But because he became an actor and because he started to lean into this particular, archetype, he got big. Like, there's a big difference between him and like True Blood, and then 4 years later doing Tarzan and being like just a beefy dude all of a sudden, right? He was not that originally. And then you move even forward in time into like The Northman, where he's like warrior king, bro.
So that you're saying that by that casting, it kind of makes those ideas all that much more apparent when he's put into submissive dog mode.
Exactly. So we're seeing what we considered, like what society considers this like traditionally big, strong, masculine guy, not be that character at all. Right? Like, if you read this on the page, I feel like you would be inclined at first to cast somebody who is physically matching the attributes of what Gabby is telling him. Like, he's a writer. He should be diminutive. He should be weak. He should be small. Like, he should not be muscular by the context of the writing of the character.
This stereotype of like a talented writer being someone who doesn't look like him.
Yeah, Woody Allen or something, right? Like, you would be like, he's neurotic. He doesn't believe in himself. Like, he's got all these sort of like traditional qualities that we've seen depicted often as this sort of dorky, nerdy weakling. By not casting him as that, we get even more of the dichotomy between those two things, right? Like, he's a physically strong, big person, but he mentally does not feel that way whatsoever. So it's enhancing that. And so I think that's makes for better casting. And then when you get to see, as you've started this with, the acting of that, it's so much more compelling.
Right.
Because we're going, oh my God.
Like, to see him be horrified at these situations.
Right.
Like, I gotta mention just one of my favorite scenes, because already with the scene I mentioned of them watching themselves get executed, cheering it on, and just how that's a perfect promise of the premise example, something you only do in this story. I mean, at that point I was like, if this movie can keep finding, surprise me in another way like that did, that's totally unique to this situation, that's great. And it happened exactly when I wasn't expecting it, which was, I was again kind of fooled like they were. Maybe you saw it coming, when they again cajole him to start beating who he thinks is the police chief or whoever.
Yeah.
And jokes on him, which of course everyone just thinks it's just a hilarious, it's just a joke, Jamesy. It's him. He's been beating his double, which is, it just shows too what we're saying. It's like, if you can find a unique thing, the thing to do that's just unique to this story, it generally, I mean, I want to say always, I have to think about, will do that exact thing of just getting into those themes just so richly. And that really got to me, of like, he was just beating himself up so good.
That is like, to me, I think why I like this movie so much is because I'm the type of person who mentally beats myself up all the time, right? If I don't write every day, or work out every day, or like whatever, anything that I've set out to be like, that's something I quote unquote should do for my own personal betterment. When I don't do it, I'm like, you fucking suck. Like, dude, get your shit together and stop being such a loser. And like, don't sit around and like look like watch YouTube video, like do something with yourself. Like I'm super self-flagellating if I let myself be, and antidepressants help. But I relate greatly to this urge to be, I don't want to use this term, but it's the easiest way to put it, to be productive. I don't like the idea of like productivity for the sake of it, but like I want to make things. I want to create things, and I want to experience things through that. And when I don't fulfill that, I'm mad, and I'm mad at myself. Like I'll turn inward and beat myself up. So I relate to this character's, like the whole setup is a metaphor for us beating ourselves up. I mean, he's literally doing it knowingly at the end, unknowingly halfway through, right? Like it literally doing it and metaphorically doing it in the film. Like the whole movie is like, I'm a failure.
His book was 6 years ago now.
Right. What have I done with my life? Right. I think that all the time. And then like all our friends be like, you've like produced a lot of stuff. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, but none of it like feels like enough. So there's this like, it's almost like this hunger all the time is being met with self-flagellation, right? Like I like, and that's a bad cycle to be in. And yet here we are. And so to see a film that's like so concisely depicting that on all the whole spectrum of levels. Like it's doing it metaphorically, it's doing it thematically, it's doing it literally. It's, having all of that and watching this character go through all of that in the face of utter unhinged, insane people with the themes of society as well. I'm like, all of this is what I want in a movie.
Right. It's realize it's so like extra horrifying. I mean, we kind of already said about them hurting their doubles, in that just how these people, they're not just treating these doubles as if they just don't care about them, but as if they are not human at all.
Right.
Like, because like as if they,
which is a metaphor for what we do to ourselves, right? Like why in our brains will we spend any time whatsoever being like, you piece of shit,
right,
to ourselves?
Yeah. It's
so inhumane. Like, why would we do that?
It brings up that idea for me, the inverse of that, the idea of kind of like inner child work.
Yeah.
Of just like makes you horrified.
That's what this movie could have done too. You want to add a level, show the duplicate in this growing phase. I mean, obviously that's not how they depict it. Like it's a duplicate at adulthood immediately. But you could do a version of this where the duplicate grows from a single cell or whatever, all the way up through, like it's an expedited growth sequence.
Right.
And so there could be a version of you, the duplicate of you, that like the process arrested at like 10.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, we messed up. You like, well, you walk into a room and there's a bunch of the messed up versions of the duplicate, which is a suggestion in the movie.
Right.
And one of them is like your 10-year-old self being like, help me.
Very Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea that I think there is something to that where it's healing to like see, as a parent sees their kid as in that young self, the innocent self, and just, want to give that part just comfort and love and say, I love you. And just this is just so beyond that.
Which his wife tries to do, right? Like she makes that suggestion.
Which, but when you see someone who is begging for their life, like in the case of their doubles in pain, that you could say it is an immediate into viewing someone as their child self when someone 100%. Is that emotional. So just is that much more just sort of tragic and terrifying the way that they're, again, just treating them as literal non-humans when they have their exact experience too, because then it just gets in that whole head trip thing of that could be the them that we were with up to this point, which we've mentioned, but just to mention it again is just an ongoing thing that makes it so good. I feel like I want to mention specific moments, see if that spurs anything else. that were horrifying. That first reveal of his clone, his face coming out of the goo, where he looks at him and just kind of, the clone him looks at the real him and just kind of gasps and screams. Just the stuff of nightmares was so good.
Yeah.
And then something about that kid casting for the kid killing his first double. It's that grin on his face.
I know. And coming back to that kid, I was so pleased. Okay, so when he finds himself having, out in the village or whatever, or out in the country, he's escaped Gabby and the crew, and they take him in, and he wakes up in a bed in this like old farmhouse. I immediately was like, oh man, this is going to be the kid from the beginning's house, right? I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. That's what you do in a movie. To have then that payoff, have this insanely well-cast, creepy kid grin thing happen, but then to have that also be a dream is genius, because it's, again, taking what we kind of, the film cinematic language or storytelling language that we know, and just pushing it one step further. It's like giving us what we want, because in the moment I'm like, yeah, I want that. That's the way this should go. And then pushing it a little bit further and having it not be reality also confirms that we are in his brain too. That he's thinking the same thing we're thinking as the viewer, which is the fear that the house he ended up in is this kid's house. There's a reason we, the viewer, want that to happen, because it makes sense to be the worst thing to happen. So to have the character's brain doing the same thing that the audience brain is doing in that moment is great. Like, that's great storytelling. Anyway, the kid is creepy.
Terrifying, sinister face. Yes. There was an audible just sort of shiver in the audience when that kid approached with that grin on his face.
Yep.
So satisfying.
Yeah. I would really say that the design of the booth, I guess,
the cloning booth,
the duplication booth,
it's it's the infinity pool,
right? Yeah, they're right, exactly. The infinity pool, the stepping into the gooey red whatever substance that it is, and having more gooiness come in, and then just, I actually think it was really smart for them to. I thought to myself, oh, it's going to be really scary if that whole thing fills up and he's like trapped in there and like drowning, because have that claustrophobic drowning fear. But by not doing that, well, we don't know, right? It doesn't show that happening. It kind of shows a lot of like flashing light. Did you notice the beginning said like, hey, if you have epilepsy, like he's like, be careful with this movie. That made me go, oh, this is a Xerox. He's being Xeroxed, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of the vibe that we're getting. That's
great.
The duplication is this like antiquated way that we humans have copied things in the past.
It's like, a way that's amazing, subliminally built into us, the Xerox method. That's
but great. Then having it be in this kind of nice like bathhouse style tiled like little.
That's again,
all of that is so great.
Right. Which again is part of the unique Cronenberg thing, I feel like. Just the sort of materials and elements, just the design of it all.
I know. I really love that. And just the design of the hallucination sequences as well, which feels similar to the duplicating sequence in certain ways.
Right. I don't know what else to say about those scenes, but I just got to say again, I loved those tripping out scenes.
Listen, I'm not a regular pot smoker, but I would really like to watch this movie like super baked.
That means it'll have an effect for you, and that's great. I encourage you to.
I also found myself being like, oh, I want to go frame by frame through this like hallucination sequence, because so much visually was happening. And I was like, but I want to know what like each image is, which I'm sorry, but that's not a common, like, that's really nerdy. right? Like I'm usually like, yeah, just like let it wash over you and whatever. I'm like, no, I want to know more.
All that much more reason why you should buy it, right?
Right, exactly.
Have a copy. I just kind of bring it back to that other theme that's at play here, the Hostel one,
dude.
I just got to mention, like, I love, like, where I saw that so much was just in the bookends, the beginning and the end, where we start out with this sort of almost numbing normalcy where they're talking about, I hope the omelet bar chef's going to be there, right? It's like, it's again, I mean, to reference White Lotus we were talking about, or I mentioned, it's very much that idea. And like, we're just immediately tuned into I want to see these people grow and do more. And life is, I mean, that's the other head trip about it with these sorts of things, is like an omelet bar could and should be exciting and completely like something you're grateful for, but it's in this terms representing a kind of banal normalcy.
Sure.
So that as the starting point. And then the escalation from there, of course, but then just so good, just how it hit it all home with the ending, where after we have them like, what do you call it? Running his bus off the road, holding him at gunpoint. I mean, all this stuff that they've put him through. Like, look at what they put him through in this movie, right? And then to have it all come back with when they're on their like bus ride home or whatever to back to the airport, and just kind of like, oh, so what are you gonna do when you get back? Well, I was probably gonna rearrange the furniture. Oh, she's always doing that. Ha 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 ha. It's just like, it's so good, and it was just so on point with just this idea that like, I don't know, that everyone is that on some level. What's that line we're allowed to, you know, push, and that these super rich people are just like, how they've separated those selves in some kind of way. It's like, we've gotten our yearly fix, we've gotten off, now we're back, and then see you guys next year. Bye.
Yep. Yeah. I that image of from the bus, I know it's like, this is how you shoot that shot regardless, because you want everybody in shot. But all I could think about is the shot in the end of The Graduate.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right?
I can picture it immediately. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, so regardless of intention, the visual language of cinema that we just now know because we've like, it's a thing. Having that it was so pleasing to me too. Maybe the shot in and of itself originally and always has been just a pleasing thing. But if you want to relate it to The Graduate,
which you do,
which I do, because I love that movie too, having that exact same shot with just him, right? In The Graduate, it's them as a couple post her leaving her own wedding. Having him just sit there and have, like, in a way, it's like having the family drama over. Like that in The Graduate, that's sort of what they've escaped, right? They've escaped the family drama and in its own way, the banality of what your family wants of you.
Right, but spoilers, and the point of that is that a new banality sets in, or does it?
Correct. There's this question mark on that shot.
It's a mixed ending. That's the most famous example of a mixed kind of ending.
Right. In this, like, I just like the, you know, it's the suggestion of that and what that like implication could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that he's now by himself. His marriage is over. His life has changed, right? I don't even think that this was an intentional thing whatsoever. I think it just sort of broadly affects us. And you can be like, oh, this is kind of like that.
Can you imagine them running into each other like a few months later? Like Gabby's just like, oh, James, yeah, so you're working on that book. How you doing? Uh-huh. Yeah.
Are you going back next summer?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, maybe we'll see that. Oh, yeah, sure. Let us know. All right. I mean, just what's underneath it all.
It's weird because there are a number of shots throughout that made me feel that way, where I'm like, I don't think that they're intentionally referencing other film, but I am like feeling the feelings of those, like the shot of him, the final shot of him on the beach in the chair with the rain around him, and it's a very golden hour sort of shot.
Right.
I'm like, isn't that in like a Tony Scott film? You know what I mean? Like some, like, I don't know, what would be a good example? Like Cocktail.
Are you saying
that's not a Tony Scott film, but I mean, I'm saying that there are shot selections that feel like other films that are in the drama or romantic drama realm.
I feel like that is almost more like that's because it's shot well. And then I think what you're doing is, keep using that term, this cosmic soup of it all. Well, our films that we've seen and loved that are famous and known, and their styles and shots and techniques, they are a part of they're a part of us. When we're filmmakers, we will manifest things that can echo it in ways. And I think you're pretty attuned on picking up on those, but I do think it's at the level where it's not deliberate, but I put it more as that kind of magic of it all.
That's fair. And I'm totally willing to concede that it's not deliberate, but if it is, it's incredibly smart.
Yeah.
Because if you are matching or echoing shots from those movies, like, you're saying another thing about the story and about the characters, which is the comfort that we find in those movies that are all kind of like, they're like in our brains now. This movie is even more a weird reflection of them.
Right.
And so if it's intentional, I think that's really, really cool.
I think sunset on a beach will make us think Tony Scott, but I mean, it's generic enough that
it's generic,
feel like.
But I'm like, dude, the feel is really there. Like the coloring of that shot is unlike most other shots in the film.
And was your read on that scene? I mean, just checking in, my thought the clear read was the whole, this could be, we don't know. It was messing with the idea of what's the double or not. Is this really him or not? Because it just sort of suggests maybe that there's one of him or a version of him still back there. Maybe.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I mean, that's why. What else would the read on the scene be? It could kind of be like he sent one of his doubles back to live his boring life, and now he just wants to exist on a beach.
No, I like that. I guess my read on it was more esoteric. I guess that he cannot return. So when he pulverized his dog self, the likelihood that dog self was his original self, and symbolically and literally he destroyed his original self. The what would you call that? The him prime, not a copy, was the dog. And he's a copy. This version of him is a copy who pulverized and literally and figuratively destroyed his prime self, because he's now forever changed. This is all thematic. But I think you could take it as that read, and that he now cannot return to his former life, because that's his former self.
And how does that shot mean all that for you?
In that he's now in purgatory because he can't leave that place. And to sit at the resort after the resort is closed in the rainy season is to move into the space that the resort represents on the opposite side of it.
Right. Like you can't live in fantasy, or like you can't be on vacation forever. It's going to start to rain.
Correct. But he can't go back to reality because he doesn't exist anymore. That version of him doesn't exist.
Yet we see his buddies try to do just that, as if it is all normal, talking about their rearranging furniture.
Yeah, but they may either be their original selves, or they've just come to terms with the fact that they're a copy and they don't give a shit. Which is even more like depressing, because they truly don't care about any of this.
Or what is really horrifying is that it's they would be acting exactly the same. That's the double doesn't know it's the double because they have their exact same memories up to that point imprinted in them.
Yeah.
I guess unless how they come back out of the goop lets them know if they're a double or not. I don't know. That's not.
Well, they posed the question in that first like meeting too, where
right,
they're like,
right. So
we're all probably robots anyway,
right,
or
we
whatever.
Keep talking about that. All right. Well, anything else you want to say? What worked?
Okay, yeah. So the last thing for me is just to really emphasize how good Mia Goth.
I'm glad
is.
you're going there. Yeah.
So I was saying to Britt, where'd she kind of come from? Suddenly, we've now seen 3-4 films with her. Or I've seen 4. I think we've watched 3 now. Pearl, X, and this. And it's like this person just arrived and is just way, way more elevated as an actor than anybody else like in film right now. So what's that all about? And how the hell did that happen? And I was like, well, it happens because she's talented, obviously. Like she's incredibly talented. But it doesn't happen just out of the blue. You have to have the opportunity to expose your essence as an actor in the right role.
Well, being a nymphomaniac, I think that's an opportunity where an actor is able to do that.
Right. Is that a real proclamation on her part that Mia Goth the person or the casting is?
Well, no, that would just make sense if you're in a film that's like Nymphomaniac, then what would happen? Then you have an opportunity to really show yourself.
But like she's now being given roles where she can bloom into what she is best at.
And I say that because that's her first listed film here. So
yeah. And I'm sorry, but she's doing things on a subtle level that are like, I don't know that maybe you give credit to the director in her performance to some degree, but like that's her.
She's very much, when she talks about acting, says, I mean, this may be things of note, but she talks about it's all just very much a body thing for her. Like when asked about, not her monologue in Pearl, but her freak out that kind of went viral of I'm a star, but I'm a star. Someone asked her like, ooh, just kind of a generic, not really a question of like that just sounded or came across as like, yeah, that was great. So how do you do that? It sort of felt like the question. And she was like,
saw that interview,
right?
Mm.
But she was credit to her, very she was great, very classy. And explains she just kind of, only prepares, you only do so much to prepare, but it's all very much just she lets her body do the everything, the talking. So all you hear good acting. And I got to shout her out then too. I mean, Cure for Wellness, I'd love to dismember. I haven't seen that since it came out.
I haven't watched that.
The Gore Verbinski movie she's in. It was really cool. I'd love to see where that is 5-6 years later now. Emma, I've seen her in. She's great in that. Oh yeah, High Life and Suspiria came out the same year.
Oh God, that's right. She's in Suspiria.
Yeah.
I think what it is that she's been, as a career, she's been given enough tether to be good. Mm-hmm. And then when she did X, they let all of the tether out. Actually, more like when they did Pearl.
Yeah.
They let all the tether out.
Which was co-written by her.
Right, exactly. So it's like, it's a nice case of an actor being able to be like, if you want the most out of me, let me do my thing. Mm-hmm. And then doing it, and everybody goes, oh my God. Where has this person been? Like, well, they've been there the whole time. But they're just like, it's landing because of her contribution. Anyway, that's all to say. I'm just kind of saying she's amazing.
Yep.
In this, like, I'm like, she's so unhinged. I know people like this in real life. I dated a person like that.
I want to say lucky you.
Not cool.
Okay. like her character in this movie,
like unhinged at times, and then like flipping on a dime. Like the next second, it's like, oh yeah, but everything's great. Like it's so scary to be around that thing and to have an actor be able to like do that concisely is amazing.
And she's also just so gorgeous, though.
She is. I remember thinking to myself, like, man, this person's features are not like real because they're so perfect. I feel like she's a drawing. Like an artist went like, okay, here's how you do like cute, perfect lips. Here's how you do nose. You know what I mean? Like,
I saw
her non-eyebrows is a little strange, but then it like
it looks great.
And then eventually you're like that's perfect for her.
Right. There's women on TikTok talk with the same eyebrows talking about how she like made them feel comfortable with their eyebrows.
Oh, that's nice.
She's great.
Yeah.
She is.
Anyway,
great.
She is incredible, and I hope that. Well, I mean, we'll see Maxine. I bet Maxine is just going to be.
That not get our expectations too high, but my excitement is through the roof.
Expectations.
Yes. Anyway, yes. All praise, all hail, Goth.
That's right.
Let's see if there's anything that did not work for us.
Oh, okay.
All right, here we go. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
We got this section here, Tim. I feel like this is one of those stupid things where it's like I need to see it again. But kind of like what you were saying earlier, how, can you imagine if there was a scene where, you know, they killed their little kid self? It just had that little bit of a premature ending feel on a first viewing for me, where I was like, it had just escalated so well. And of course, so much happens. But on some level, I was just like prepared just for one more unique escalation of this technology somehow to bring it up to yet another unexpected level of horror and body horror and all that jazz. But I mean, now just looking back, I'm like, I think I'll watch it again and be like, no, it's perfect. It's exactly how it's supposed to be.
I am very hard pressed to find something that didn't work.
Well, you don't have to struggle. That's fine. We could move on here.
Man, that is interesting when this happens too, because it does happen to us. I don't know.
Great. Let's move on then.
Okay.
We loved it. Yeah. Maybe I will say this is not, but just something to sort of sum up what did work and what did not work. And we were talking about Possessor originally. Mm-hmm. This just felt way more complete to me in a sense than Possessor. And again, I didn't love Possessor. Or not that I didn't like Possessor. I didn't love it though.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, just to bring it all back in that sense. But here we go. All right. We both loved it. So let's just move on. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
I just kind of mentioned earlier that there was the kid's grin felt like a visceral reaction in the theater. I think it's always fun for these movies where we do get to see in theater on their original run.
Right.
These podcasts act as a preservation in time. So for anyone listening 100 years from now, well, thanks for listening, as we like to say. But the reaction was there was a guy at the beginning who I believe it was after she got him off. The guy was kind of like, what the fuck? Or something like that. And he said what the fuck? And then a woman said something else to that. It's kind of like, oh my God. And then at the end, that same guy, as soon as the movie ended, said something similar, just like, what the fuck? Or just something like that. I think it's fascinating. I do not relate. For me, I'm just like, this is just a story being told. Like, I'm just accepting it at face value.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how extreme or weird. I don't know. That's just to speak up for all the people who rarely think things are actually weird. I'm like, no, this is just like, these are just the words on the page. This is just what it is. Like, I don't know.
I had a similar theater thing, not exactly that, but early on, I don't remember what the moment was though, but early on in the movie, the guy behind me just like, there's, you know, some moment in the scene that was provocative or suggestive of something. I don't remember what. And he just like let out this like weird discomfort cackle. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it was that kind of thing that I was
I'm like, we're going
to
do that this whole, like, this is a Cronenberg film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's going to be weird. And it's going to make you uncomfortable.
Sounds like you at the end of Midsommar.
That's true. I was unhinged during that. But it just was out of control. And I was like thinking, damn, this is going to be a long, like, experience. Luckily, he only did it like one other time, and it was in the first act. So that's nice. But to your point, in some of those moments, there were not very many people in, because I went during the day because that's the only time I could go. And I think there were 2, 4, 6, 8, maybe 9 people in the theater, maybe. And there was that uncomfortable kind of like chuckling at the ejaculation scene, and a couple of the, like, when boobs came out. I'm like, God, like, are we 12?
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Yeah.
Get it together.
Yeah.
It's not that big a deal.
And I wonder, I don't know. I'm like Mia Goth plus Cronenberg. Like these are where my expectations are at. I don't know.
Right. And granted, I'm fine with people not knowing what they're stepping into to a degree. Like Skinamarink, 11 people leaving. I'm like, what were you expecting? Like, come on. Like, the trailer was not so like misleading.
God, I love
like, give me a break.
Right, I love how divisive that was.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
I mean, you know what was really annoying in the theater is that somebody wore track pants, like the nylon track pants.
People still wear those?
I guess so.
Wait, in this movie?
Yes.
Okay.
And kept like, you know, I can't do it because I'm not wearing them, but like rubbing their legs together. And I'm like, stop it.
It makes my like teeth hurt or feel weird, you know?
Like I couldn't believe it.
Like that nail on chalkboard feel. Those pants do that for me.
Ugh, brutal.
Well, okay. We've swayed. Anything else for things of note?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head here.
Well, then this has
just loved it.
Yeah,
just loved it.
This has been a great discussion. Thank you, Tim. We can wind down.
No, thank you, Ryan.
We can wind down away from the infinity pool. We can step out of the infinity pool and just... What, Tim?
Oh, I thought of something that I remember before we started recording that I wanted to say. I want to give as much credit as possible to the effects designers, because I don't know how often we say this, but those sequences, the hallucination sequences, from a construction point of view, an art direction point of view, yes, totally, but the construction of that is a crazy thing to do, and like, I get it. That's like, I get why you have a disclaimer at the beginning saying like there's like flashing lights or whatever, but like it's so beautifully constructed and like it's effective and it's working. So like, I wish I actually knew the name of like whoever worked on that, but they often, I feel like, are not recognized enough for that kind of stuff, because it's not like Cronenberg sat in an editing bay like splicing that together.
Right.
Like a crew of effects people did that.
Right. How great these practical effects were, you're just kind of saying.
All around, yeah. The visual, practical, and hallucinatory sequences are amazing. So credit to them.
Great. All right. Well, I left one foot in the infinity pool. All right. Can I take it out now?
Yes, you can.
All right. Or I leave in the goo. Gonna wind down with some recommendations. I had mentioned before Hal Ashby movie, and I said, kind of alluded to why I was watching his films, but did not totally reveal why. I just finished reading the book Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, How the Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Generation Saved Hollywood by Peter Biskind. Something that had been on my list since, film school days, forever. But finally read it. I loved as much as I could hope I would. How about you?
Let's see. Why don't I do Fire of Love? Fire of Love. I'm pretty sure.
Is that the new documentary about the volcano couple?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really great. So it's directed by Sarah Dosa. And it's there were two volcanologists that were about the same age, grew up in the same town, were born in the same town, and met in that same town, and both happened to both be obsessed with volcanoes when they were younger. And they met and became a couple and became like two of the sort of premier volcanologists on the planet. And it's a really incredible story just of like the time frame that science was being studied. But these two in particular, in that they were a couple, but like studying a thing that is so dangerous and like insane in a lot of ways. Like people go up to like active volcanoes, like you're probably gonna get killed. But I don't know, there's a quality to the documentary that I found really beautiful and pleasing and touching, and I also just find like geology and volcano stuff really interesting too. So I'm like, oh, cool. Now, like let's learn some stuff. So all in all, it's a really great documentary.
Great. Yeah, no, something that caught my eye.
Get into it.
Great. Well, if you made it this far, thanks for making it this far. You can find us wherever you found us. We got dismemberinghorror.com. You can find our email, any social media things we do. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a 2022 film we watched on Shudder called Speak No Evil. I think that's it. So in closing, whether you're the original or the double, thanks for listening.
Oh, and we'll see you next time, and you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.